Q&A. We are so excited to have Melanie Bunn back with us this morning, and Melanie is going to be talking about managing sleep. And she and I have talked about this before, and I always learn new things, not only for the people I'm caring for, but for myself as well. So this presentation is sponsored in part by ASI, and so we want to thank them. I know we have quite a few people from ASI on the call today. So thank you all so much. And Melanie, I'm just going to let you go ahead and jump in as we drink our coffee and talk about sleep.
So I don't think about that I'm sitting here, slamming down my second cup of coffee. And I've already been for my walk, and I'm drinking some water and all of those things. How is that going to make me able to sleep last night? Maybe some out in the sunshine. And sleep is one of those things that is really complicated. So this is advertised and set up as a question and answer. But I thought I might give some foundation to kind of build some of those questions from. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint. And just to kind of get us started, we are going to spend most of our time in question and answer, but I just kind of wanted to give us some context. So sleeping and aging. So I want to make sure I'm really clear and consistent that not all people living with dementia everybody is aging, but not everybody living with dementia is aged. So what I mean by that is we have a lot of people throughout the world and in North Carolina who are 50 and 40 and 30 who wouldn't typically be considered older people who are having the impacts of dementia. So if there's a Venn diagram, the overlap is significant, but it's not inclusive. That there's some people who are older who don't have dementia. There's some people who are younger who have dementia. So, but enough older people have dementia and enough people with dementia older, I think it makes sense to kind of take a moment and talk about good sleep is good for our health. It's good for our brains. It's good for our bodies. It helps us heal and restore. It cleans our brain. It helps us process. Many of us probably have memories from school of studying, things aren't working, going to sleep, waking up the next day, and things are working because our brain has in the background been processing and storing and cleaning, and things are better. Bad sleep has the opposite impact. So if you're not sleeping well, your brain can't work optimally and your body doesn't heal as well. That's why managing pain is so important, because pain and sleep go hand in hand, and healing and sleep go hand in hand. Aging does have some impacts on sleep. Things like how long people sleep, because older people tend to wake up more frequently. So they spend more time in the lighter levels of sleep. And we're going to talk about sleep in a few minutes, and that'll make more sense. But they spend more time in the lighter levels of sleep where something can wake them up more easily. And then once they're awake, they tend to have more trouble going back to sleep, which means they have less nighttime sleep and less deep sleep, which is when a lot of the work happens. And diseases impact sleep. If I'm short of breath or if I have pain, I'm not going to sleep very well. And sometimes it's the management of disease. So sometimes maybe I've got congestive heart failure, so I take a medication that causes me to empty my bladder a lot, which means I get up through the night, which means I don't sleep well. And sleep and dementia there are some unique interactions. So it's related to how the brain itself changes and how those brain changes impact our understanding of the world and impact our understanding of information. So it starts deep down in the brain with the hypothalamus, which is kind of the control center between the endocrine system and the nervous system, which means that those hormones that like melatonin that get released to kind of tell us it's time to sleep now, those kind of interactions don't work as well. So there's some real chemical reasons why people living with dementia don't sleep. And the brain stem, which is at the very back of the brain, where autonomic functions like sleep are and breathing and things like that. And the hippocampus, which has to do with memory and wayfinding. And for this purpose, understanding of time. So I don't have the same sense of how long it's been since I've slept or when I need to sleep. And this prefrontal cortex, which is how it's the most sophisticated, it's the last part of our brain to really form. And it has to do with kind of organizing and sequencing. So for me, I know that, I eat supper and then I finish up some emails and then I watch some TV and then I go to sleep. That's not really my life, but we'll pretend it is. Um, and and so that way of organizing helps my brain prepare, my body prepare that it's time for sleep. And for people living with dementia, often those organizing, sequencing, decision making kinds of things don't work. And it impacts the family care partners because not only do I not have a sense of what I'm good at and what I need, I don't have a good sense of what my care partner needs, even when they tell me. It doesn't really integrate into my brain so I can see it from that other person's whose perspective who says, if you won't sleep, at least be quiet so I can sleep. So the structural changes in the brain continue across time. There's nothing we can do about that right now. The chemical changes, they really fluctuate. And that's where a lot of the unpredictability and life getting really hard in the late afternoon and the early evening and even later in the day kinds of things start to happen. So I'm not going to show, I don't plan to show many brain pictures, but I did want to show this one just to emphasize. So take a minute and look at these two brains. And many of you from other talks already know that these are autopsy brains. These are real brains. These are brains of people who generously donated their brains so scientists and researchers and clinicians can understand, and family members and care partners can understand how the brain works and how it doesn't work. But for these two brains, the brain on the left on the screen is someone who died from an accident. The brain on the right on the screen is somebody who died from the end of their Alzheimer's disease. And it's pretty clear that we can't expect the same things out of these two people. That brain on the right doesn't have as much tissue to motivate and to move and to do and to process. So it's really clear. And just so there's a better understanding, when these two men, same gender, died, they were also the same age, they were the same size, controlled to the point of having the same head circumference. So you can see that all of the parts of the brain are impacted. And since so many parts of the brain impact sleep, it's not surprising that people living with dementia are going to have challenges with sleep. So what does sleep really mean? Well, there are really 4 stages of sleep. The first one is kind of a transition. And this is the kind of the stage between being awake and being asleep. And so if I'm kind of drifting off and I'm almost there and Lisa calls my name, I'll wake up, but I won't necessarily think that I was really actually asleep. So it's that very light transition. The second stage of sleep is when your physical quieting starts. It's when your heart rate begins to slow, your temperature begins to drop, your muscles begin to relax. So your sleep, and it's the physical quieting. The third stage is that deep, healthy working sleep. That deep, healthy working sleep, when your body repairs itself, when your body heals, when your body processes toxins, and when your brain does the same thing. Your brain cleans itself and your brain processes toxins, and your brain works to store new information. So if you don't get this deep sleep, your body and your brain aren't going to function optimally. The fourth is called the REM stage, and this is when you dream, and this is when your body is actually, for most people, not for all people, but for most people, your body is almost paralyzed, and that's because you're dreaming and you don't want to act out your dream. So your brain is so powerful, your brain is dreaming, your brain is really busy. If your body wasn't kind of paralyzed, you would be, throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium if that's what your dream is, or you would be running away from tigers in your sleep if that's what your dream is. And it's not healthy to be moving around for you or for your partner, for you to be moving around a lot during sleep. So your body is really still and your brain is really busy. And this takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours to kind of cycle through. So if we kind of add this into dementia, we kind of add this into aging, what then tends to happen is the person is spending more time in this transition, more time in this physical quieting, less time in this deep sleep, and less time in this REM sleep, which means people can sleep, but not necessarily feel rested. So people can sleep, but not necessarily feel invigorated and feel like, oh, that was a great night's sleep. And often what happens is I get into stage 1 sleep, I get into stage 2 sleep, and there's a noise outside, or my care partner is getting ready to go to bed, or something, and I wake up and then I think it's morning. So then I'm up and about and going and doing, and nobody gets any sleep. Or I get to stage 1, I get to stage 2, I get to stage 3, I get to stage 4, I move back into stage 1, and something wakes me up then. And then I'm up and I feel like I've slept all night. So part of the challenge with people living with dementia is not having all of these disruptions completely throw off the rest of the night. And hopefully we'll have some time to talk about that. But we're going to move into what I know, no. One of the questions is going to be, and one of the questions is, Lisa, what is the question? What are people going to ask me? Can't you give her a
pill?
Can't you give her a pill to make her sleep? She's been up. Can't you just give her something to sleep so I can sleep? And that would be lovely. That would be amazing. That would be wonderful. And not so much. And I hate that, because I also wish there was just a pill that people could take, or something that people could do. There was a study of older people without dementia who were having trouble sleeping, and they gave them all medication to help them sleep. And 80% of the people who took the medication said the amount of improvement they got in their sleep wasn't worth the adverse reactions of the medication. So what that means was they didn't get enough improvement to really feel like it was worth it. So the side effects, which might be something like being drowsy the next day. The side effects might be really confused. The side effects are often, dry mouth and feeling dried out. So the adverse reactions weren't worth the bit of improvement they got in sleep. Plus, if we go back to this, medications tend to help people get into transition and physical quieting and don't really help people move into stage 3 and REM sleep, which means they don't have that ability to really feel rested when they wake up the next morning. So they're not really getting that refreshing sleep. So I'm not saying there's no place for sleep medications, once in a while or one time, or there are always exceptions to every rule, but they don't seem to be a really good ongoing long-term answer for sleep, especially when the person has dementia, because sleep is really complicated. So we've really got 3 things to think about. We've got the physical things. Well, I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm just going to see if there are any questions so far about the levels of sleep, about the process of sleep, about the importance of sleep, about brain in the sleep. Are there any questions up to this point? You can type them in. Well, Lisa said that you can unmute and ask, or you can type them in the chat, because I kind of threw a whole bunch of stuff at you. And I'm also going to say, if you come up with some questions about sleep later on, or some questions about this, you can reach out to Lisa, and she can either connect you with me, or she knows a lot of this stuff herself. So I'm going to go.
Melanie, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Phyllis Blackman, and I'm so sorry. I've had 4 people to work on my computer to try to get my camera to work, and we can't. And then my phone, I couldn't hear anyone. My question, and you might be getting to this, so I might be jumping ahead. Can you help us? I'm the caregiver of my mother, and I do it by myself. Mother seems to be getting her, and all this seems, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think she has her nights and days confused. I thought she had her nights and days confused, but I think it's more typically what you are describing with the transition and the physical quietening. And then when it's time to go to bed, she's been sleeping, and I wake her up to go to bed because she sleeps in her recliner, that she sleeps for like 3 hours, and then she's popped up and she's ready to get up at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And so it might not be so much the confusion of the night and day situation. It just might be this awful disease called dementia.
Yeah, and so we think about we have some. It's complicated because often, there's a pattern. So after supper, there's kind of this hole between what do you do between supper and bedtime, because you don't want to do anything exciting, because you don't want the person to to be revved up or to be anxious, and so that doesn't work. And if somebody takes a nice little 2-hour nap in their recliner, and then they get up and they go to bed and they take a nice little 3-hour nap, they've really slept for 5 hours, which is sometimes a night's sleep for older people. And now, instead of it being 6 o'clock in the morning, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and nobody wants, I don't anyway, I can't speak for everybody, but people really don't want to be up. So I think there's some of this, and we're going to talk a little bit later, but we can start the conversation now of finding some ebb and some flow. So that time after supper, we've got some things planned that aren't exciting, but are things to do. So the person doesn't take that 2-hour nap. I notice this a lot in care communities. that supper is over at 6:30 and everybody is in bed by 8. Well, if everybody is in bed by 8, what is 8 hours after 8? 8 hours after 8 is 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, then we've got people getting up when people are making rounds at midnight. They don't go back to sleep. And then people have been in bed for 4 hours, for 8 hours at 4 o'clock in the morning. So then people are getting up in the middle of the night. So really thinking about maybe there's some value to extending bedtime, not to the point where the person is so exhausted they then can't sleep. They're overtired and they can't sleep, but maybe to extending how late people stay up. So if I go to bed at 10, then staying in bed till 6 makes a little more sense, or maybe even 7 or 8. So it's finding that balance of having things to do versus that 2-hour nap in the recliner. The other thing I might say is, there are some people who sleep better in a recliner than they do in a bed, whether it's because of the positioning of the recliner or if it's because of the room that they're, some people. And so if I don't have any problem if somebody sleeps in a recliner, if that's what works for them. Now, sleeping in a recliner from 7 o'clock, you've got to be aware they might get up at 3 anyway, but we might, it's not against the rules to sleep on a day bed or to sleep on a couch or to sleep in a recliner. If the person doesn't wake up the next morning and their back is killing them or something, we got to be open to several different things. I see some questions in the chat. Yes, Ellen, it is possible for people living with dementia to sleep well. I have some people who it actually is the opposite problem of my person sleeps all the time. They nap all day, they sleep all night. And some people do sleep reasonable amounts of time. So that tends to happen best when people have enough activity during the day. So there's enough stuff going on during the day. People are busy, they're engaged, they've got time to rest so they don't get overtired. And then there's the routines at night that follow the routines of their life, which include things like, I had a lady who I was asked to see her in an assisted living facility because the staff would go in, 8 o'clock at night, get her all settled in, all comfortable. They would come back in and she would be on the floor. And she wasn't like sprawled on the floor, but she was sitting on the floor beside her bed. And this happened every single night. And it didn't make any sense. And it's like she was comfortable in the bed. When they got her back in the bed, then she would stay in the bed. And what ultimately they figured out is she was a person who would kneel and pray every night before she went to bed. And so when she was given the opportunity to do that, then she would go to bed, stay in bed, and life went better. So people who sleep well at night tend to be people who have those routines. If this is a person who always took a bath at night to kind of relax, they couldn't go to bed unless they were clean, then that might be part of the routine that they need to then help them rest well at night. So yes, people can sleep well with dementia. We want to make sure that, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes as well, that the environment kind of supports sleep, which means a cooler environment. It means a darker environment. It means an environment where there's not a lot of unpredictable noise. So we'll talk about some of that as we go through. So I also see Jennifer has a question. If people sleeps consistently all day, do they hit the other stages or just not as often? So naps tend to be a little bit different. So it takes a good, so those earlier levels of sleep are shorter. So if someone is taking 30-minute nap, 30-minute nap, 30-minute nap, they probably aren't getting into the stage 3 and the REM sleep. If someone is really lying on the couch, they're really sleeping, then they could be getting into that stage 3 and that deep sleep. So it would kind of depend on, are they short little naps or are there longer naps? So with the impact of dementia, tends to be not that they can't do that sleep, it's just those levels of sleep are shorter and harder to get into. So really great questions. Were there any other questions? Did I miss anything, Lisa? We're good. Does anybody have any? These are great questions. Any other questions before? All right. So I'll go back to pick up kind of moving into these 3 areas of physical and cognitive and environmental. So when people don't sleep well, are they having trouble going to sleep or are they having trouble staying asleep? And all of these can come from a variety of sources. So one of the challenges with people living with dementia is not doing, and some of y'all say, I wish I had that problem, but you have a different challenge, is not expending enough energy. Because if you don't expend enough energy or have enough activity during the day, then you don't sleep well at night. So I'm thinking about, take a moment and think about a day when you didn't do very much. So maybe a day when you were on a long road trip, so you spent most of the day in the car, or maybe a day that you had a snow day where you were inside most day, or really rainy, nasty day. You're inside, you kind of were sitting in your recliner, reading, watching TV, not mopping the floors and scrubbing down the walls. A lot of times at the end of those days, you feel restless and you feel irritable and edgy, or you just feel exhausted and you didn't do anything, but you're just worn out from not doing anything. I felt that way at the beginning of COVID when we were spending so much time on Zoom. I'd sit in front of my computer for 12 hours a day and feel exhausted. And it's like, I haven't done anything, but I'm worn out. So is the person expending enough energy during the day, or is the person staying so busy, so busy, so busy, so busy, so busy, they're wound up and they're too tired to rest? Or is the person napping all day, and the napping may be coming from the brain, or the napping may be coming from this part, not just the part of the brain that controls sleep and wake, but the part of the brain that controls initiation of activity. So if I don't have anything to do, I just sit here. If I don't have anything to do, I'm going to take a nap. So it's that idea of the person having trouble getting started, or trouble initiating, or trouble getting organized for doing something. So they just sit there. So a lot of times, because of the changes in this part of the brain, or because of changes in this part of the brain or this part of the brain, people's days are pretty empty. So then they don't sleep very well at night. And you add in the changes in endocrine system and the changes in processing information and kind of filtering information, and sleep can become a real challenge. So there are 2 nurses, Kathleen Buckwalter and Jerry Richards Hall, are 2 nurses, and they came up with a theory that changed my understanding of dementia. And the theory that they came up with is something called progressively lowered stress threshold. And you can Google that. It's easy to find it. It's evidence-based, and it really makes so much sense, because what they said was, for human beings, not for people living with dementia, but for human beings, we have 3 levels of function. We've got normal, we've got anxious, and we've got dysfunctional levels. So for us, we spend most of our time in normal. We might sometimes move into anxious and sometimes move into dysfunctional. So the example I give sometimes, I had a really bad day. This was years and years and years ago. But I used to work go to work early in the morning. So I had this one day when this is way back when you had alarm clocks. The power went out, my alarm clock didn't go off, so I got up late. So what happens to my stress? My stress moves up high normal. So I throw on some clothes, I'm brushing my teeth, I've got on a black shirt, and I spilled toothpaste on it, of course, right? So then I have to change clothes. So now I'm even later. I run downstairs. My roommate drank the last of the Diet Coke, which means I don't have my Diet Coke to drink, which makes me a little bit like this. I get into my car and my roommate borrowed my car and I don't have any gas. So now I'm really beyond normal. I'm into the anxious part of my stress, right? I'm up to the anxious part of my stress. I'm driving to work and I get behind somebody who is obviously being paid by the hour to drive their car. So now I move up like this. I'm really getting like this. I walk into the building and my boss is standing there with her hands on her hips looking at me like this. And then it moves up to almost dysfunctional because if anything else had happened, I would have just let go. And I was able to, so do this with me, put one thumb way up in the air. So my amygdala was way up here. My stress is way up here. I was able to take this part of my brain, my prefrontal cortex, my logic and my reason and my impulse control, and shove this down far enough that I was able to get through the day. But it was still a really hard day. So by the time I got home that night, what did I need to do? You can drop it into the chat or you can unmute and say it out loud. By the time I got home, what did I need to do? What did I want to do?
Go to bed.
Okay, so maybe I was just exhausted and I go to bed. Do you think so Rita, if you'll unmute again, do you think I needed to do something before I go to bed or was I just done?
You probably needed to wind down
Okay.
after being so stressed and so everything's so high.
So after everything being so high, I needed to wind down some. And that's what Ellen wrote in. I needed to dissipate that anxious energy. So what are some of the things y'all do at the end of a rough day to kind of let go of some of that? Because am I the only one who's ever had a really bad day? Or have any of y'all ever had a really bad day before? I'm thinking some of y'all have had really bad. Oh, I see Ellen's thumb went up. And you can do that to communicate with me as well. Yeah, and so people are right. So a friend of mine was having a bad day and she said, I'm playing this song called I Feel Better When I'm Dancing. And I see people writing down dance about it. Ellen put that down in there too. Lisa said, go for a walk, get some exercising, hit a pillow, something like that. Maybe, it is Amazon Prime Day. That might let out some stress and might create some stress later on. Pray might be a really wonderful one. I might need to sing. I might need to call my friend Lisa and say, you are not going to believe what happened to me today. I mean, I might need to just be by myself. So I have to let go of that. The challenge with people living with dementia is it takes less to move them into those higher stages. So just an ordinary morning, trying to figure out how to take a shower and brush my teeth, and somebody's trying to take my clothes off, and things start to move up like this, and then it's time for a meal, but this food doesn't look like food, it looks like mush, and then things start to get, and things go up and up, and so when they're way up here like this, we expect them to then go to sleep, and the problem is people can't go to sleep when they're way up here like this. So the strategies that, and thank you for dropping that into the chat, that Kathleen Buckwalter and Jerry Richards Hall recommend doing, are not letting the day escalate like this, but define the ebb and the flow. So maybe morning activities are hard, so I take a break and then I have breakfast, and then I take a break, and then I do something, and then I have, and then it's, so we kind of wave the day instead of spiraling the day. So if you think about this, a lot of times the questions I get are about things like sundowning. And this starts to, I think, really explain that idea of sundowning is this progressively lowered stress threshold, and things like pain is often worse late afternoon, early evening, and nighttime. So pain is often worse. So that's the time when we have the least amount of support and things, or the least amount of distraction, the least amount of other things to keep our minds busy and our minds off the pain. So we might need to think about, how are we managing pain? It might be a visual thing, that late in the afternoon is when people are coming home from work, and I always came home from work, so it feels like I should be somewhere different besides this place that I've been all day long. So any other questions or thoughts about that? Does that kind of add some insight into some of these late afternoon, early evening kind of distressful moments, and kind of trouble settling then and going to sleep? So not seeing any. I'll go back to this PowerPoint and talk about some strategies. So we've talked about managing the ebb of the flow. Another thing they say is do hard things at the best time of day. I am a big believer in light. And I should change this and actually say light instead of sunlight, because we've got lights that harm and lights that heal, and some lights do both. The blue light that comes from screens can really impair sleep. So that's why if you're having trouble sleeping, one of the first things they say is stop scrolling. And that's one of the hardest things to do sometimes. Sunlight and being outside in the morning, in the early afternoon, using sun protector, of course, can be really helpful with getting enough sleep. And then the full spectrum lights that you can get, bulbs, or you can get devices that have the full spectrum lights. I even saw, and I don't know anybody who've used it, but I'm fascinated by it. There's a baseball cap that has a full spectrum light attached to it, which, because getting someone to sit in front of a light box might be kind of hard, but wearing a baseball cap might not be. So those kinds of things. Thinking about caffeine, and caffeine in so many things. It used to just be coffee, and now it's all kinds of extra things that we don't necessarily think about, including my favorite, chocolate. Toileting issues of there. Sometimes care partners, when people get up at night to go to the bathroom, start limiting fluids, and that is really not helpful, because when urine gets concentrated, it gets more irritating to the bladder, and an irritated bladder wants to let go more often. So making sure there is enough fluid so people stay hydrated, the bladder doesn't get irritated, the urine doesn't get concentrated. One of the things I found works really well is double voiding. And what that means is that we're getting ready to go to bed at night. The person goes into the bathroom. We get them to sit on the toilet, empty their bladder, wash their hands, do some other nighttime things, brush teeth, wash face, take out the contacts, some of those other kind of nighttime things, and then sit back on the toilet and empty their bladder again, because that double voiding will sometimes help with that getting up at night, although it may not eliminate it, because our circadian rhythms create a situation where our body processes urine as a way to clean the blood more at night when our body isn't busy doing other things. So emptying more at night is really part of the cycle. And then managing pain and managing medications. Some medications are associated with not being able to sleep. We need to figure them out. Sometimes it's the adverse reactions that sometimes some medications cause nausea. It's hard to sleep when you're feeling nauseated, although sometimes if you take the medicine at night, you sleep through the nausea. So lots of different possibilities there. Emotional and cognitive things are harder at night when you've got something on your mind or when you're in pain. Your brain just holds onto it and clings to it and processes it and goes round and round and round. So especially for people living with dementia, late afternoons and early evenings can be hard because they're tired. So things that they could do early in the day, like use a spoon, now it's too much. So using the spoon is too complicated. So maybe we need finger foods to make it easier. And our care partners are often tired if they're family care partners or if they're professional care partners. So there's less resource. We really start pulling on tomorrow's energy. So it's like, I'm done with today. We're working on tomorrow. And that's often really true for care partners. I've used all today's energy and tomorrow's not looking good. So it can build that tension and impatience and escalations. So, some strategies can be, to write down, we're going to write this down. We're going to deal with that. Is so important. Validating. That is so important. Let's write it down so we don't forget it. We are going to put it right here in this big note. Sometimes that will work. Sometimes it doesn't. Avoid the more complicated. Find those routines. Thinking about those may be routines from before we knew the person. So that may be a routine, maybe the mom who I've known in her 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I never knew her to kneel and pray, but the mom back in her 5s and 10s and 15s did kneel to pray. So thinking about, are those the routines from the past or are those routines from recently? Thinking about the environment, generally people sleep better when it's cooler. People sleep better when it's darker. People sleep better when it's quieter. And people are people. And so different things work for different people. So does this person need some white noise on in the background? Because there are going to be noises in our house. There are going to be noises in our neighborhood. There are going to be noises in this community. So do we need white noise, or do we need some gentle music that kind of buffers some of those things? Because our brains filter things during the day. Our brains filter noises and filter what we see, filter light. But at nighttime, that TV, the person living with dementia might think that's somebody up in the house. The kids are up watching TV. I had a lady who would call 911 because somebody was trying to break into her house. Somebody was trying to break into her house. And they finally, after multiple visits, figured out that there were trees that would scrape against the screen in the window. And that's what she was hearing. But she'd never lived alone. And so all of these noises get really big. So temperature is important. So thinking about rooms being cool, and part of what happens as we get older is the fat that insulates our bodies tends to migrate to the trunk from the extremities. And so it is true that many older people, their hands are cold and their feet are cold. So the idea of wearing socks is not a bad one, but maybe those socks with the grids on the bottom to keep from falling. There actually was a research project that was looking at falls at nighttime, and they put on, because people would get up at night, try to go to the bathroom. You think about all the things that happen in that situation with people, when you get up at night and you've got to go to the bathroom, you've got to go fast. You don't have time to really wait around. So people get up, they're in a hurry, maybe they lose control of their bladder. Now the floor is wet, they're in the bathroom, the floor and everything is white, and so lots of falls. And one of the things they found that didn't prevent falls but reduce them was the socks with those grid bottoms on it. So that might be something to think about. So yeah, like the wavy the day image. I'm glad you like that, Ellen. So we'll pause again and we'll take a minute and see what kind of question. We've got about 15 minutes left, or 12 minutes left, or 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes left. We'll see if anybody wants to talk. I can talk forever. I've got a whole nother section, but don't let that prevent you from asking questions, because my whole section was just if there weren't questions. So what are some questions you have about sleep? And again, yes, Ellen.
So I was wondering about using CPAP with people with dementia. Do you have any experience with that? I mean, I know that people who need the CPAP because of the pressure on their throats, I mean, they spend the day drowsy and act like they have dementia. And I'll mute again.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's actually some of the reading and the thinking I did prior to pulling together the PowerPoint was about CPAP, because CPAP, most of you probably know, is this kind of mask kind of thing that you wear that forces oxygen into, so you don't have fluctuations in oxygen. It's used a lot for people with sleep apnea who have that snoring, holding their breath. Their oxygen levels drop, they start snoring. They do feel tired during the day. They don't feel good during the day. Their brains aren't working as well as they can during the day. And it's because of this chronic sleep deprivation. And I have had a number of people, and part of it is sleep apnea is a risk factor for developing dementia. So people who have untreated sleep apnea have a higher risk of developing dementia. So I do think getting the person who has those periods where they snore and they don't breathe is a really good thing to do, to evaluate the person and then see what kind of mask or what kind of equipment or device might work for that person, because they've become much less uncomfortable, much more comfortable, much better tolerated. And so I think evaluating somebody for sleep apnea is really important. Treating sleep apnea is incredibly important. And many times people have been using their CPAP for a while, and so they are kind of comfortable with it. It's not an intrusive, uncomfortable kind of thing. So I think CPAP is really important. Did I answer your question, Ellen? You can just give me a thumbs up if I got to what you wanted. Yeah, good. So other questions or ideas or thoughts or observations? And you can either unmute and say it out loud, or you can drop it into the chat.
Melanie, I have a question for you. This is Lisa.
Sure. Yeah.
So what about the person with dementia who is rather apathetic during the day and hard to engage? Sometimes a person is go, 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 but sometimes it's hard to really engage them in things and get them moving. So if they're more sedentary than they used to be, any suggestions for ways to really engage that person in a way that maybe they're using their brain a little bit more? Is it better to aim for something physical for them? Or is it better to aim for trying challenging their mental ability that they have left? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Lisa. And you knew it was a hard one, so that's why you asked. Yeah. So I'm a if someone's issue is they're pulling into themselves, they're sedentary, they're not initiating. I often try to break that with getting people up and moving. And so some of the things I'll try is asking the person for help. I need your help in the kitchen. So I need your help because somebody who might not get up on their own might get up to help me. So I'll kind of break it down and say, I need your help. Come to the kitchen with me. So I avoid asking yes, no questions. Do you want to help me in the kitchen? Because the easiest answer, the automatic answer to that is no. Whether I want to or not, that easy kind of automatic answer is no. And so if I say, do you want to help me in the kitchen? No, I'm good. And instead I'll say, Lisa, I really need your help in the kitchen. Come on, let's go. And if Lisa says, I don't think I can do it, I say, well, Lisa, I am desperate. Would you try? So would you help me? Would you try kind of approaches, avoiding those yes, no kinds of things. The other thing I will do is try to get people to do things that make sense to them. It's time to go get the mail. So I had one lady I was working with her. She was the care partner. Her husband was the person living with dementia. And he spent days and days and days in the recliner watching ESPN. And it wasn't good for him. He needed more because he wasn't sleeping well. He wasn't eating well. He needed more. So his job had always been, when he would, in the morning on the way to work, he would go and put the mail in the mailbox and then head out to work. At night, when he got back from work, he would bring the mail in from the mailbox. So what she started doing was writing letters to all of their friends and family. And she would say, so Lisa, I've got a letter. All this stuff I've got here, somewhere there should be a letter. Lisa, I've got a letter. We need to put it in the mailbox. I'm sending a letter to Matthew. So he would take the letter and he'd walk it down to the mailbox and he'd put it in the mailbox and he'd come back and she would say, hey, Lisa, I've got a letter for Kevin. Can you take it to the mailbox? And he would walk down the mailbox and put the letter to Kevin. Hey, Lisa, I've got a letter for Wendy. Can you take it to the mail? Let's go take it to, not can you? Bad Melanie. Can you take it? Let's go ahead and take it to the mailbox. Take it to the mailbox and come back. And then she would reverse that process at the end of the day, where she would say, let's go check the mailbox. And there would be one piece of mail. He would head back in, she would stick another piece in the mailbox, and then they would go, oh, let's go check the mailbox. And so that's one of the times when, the memory issues can work to your advantage. So, so that's the example of not just getting up because you need to get up, but getting up for meaningful. Let's go to get ice cream. So something that might break through, that the person might not be willing or able to get up for just anything, but getting up for ice cream, and then on the way to get ice cream, we stop by the bathroom because we just happened to walk by it. So those kinds of things can be helpful to get people up and doing. If the person getting up isn't working, then I might say, could you help me with this? And what it might be is a basket of socks that need to be sorted and folded. Or I might have, could you sand this for me? Or I might have something as simple as a basket of cards that the person can sort. But it's just about giving the person something to do that will burn up some energy, give them some purpose, and hopefully wind up helping to sleep at night. Did I sort of answer your question, Lisa?
You definitely did. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Other questions or ideas? So the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and Lisa will send you the PowerPoint. I know it's frustrating to some people not to have the PowerPoint ahead of time so they can follow along, but I never really know what we're going to wind up talking about. So just to leave you with something quick, dementia is progressive and it changes, and our brains change through the day, through the night, through the time as well. So my friend Tipa came up with this idea of calling people gems instead of calling them numbers. And so whether people are living their best life, total sapphire and flexible, or rigid and living in the present, or remembering, the way things used to be in the past where I've got to go check on the children before I can go to bed, or Amber and living in the moment of the world is so interesting, touching and feeling, or living in the movement of I'm either down and stuck or I'm up and going, or in the pearl state where they really are pretty much better chair for their lives. Dementia is going to impact how they sleep. And I'm going to challenge you for something, because all of these things we've talked about, thinking about the person living with dementia, I'm going to challenge you to, when you get the slide set, to go back through and again to think about all of these issues, not for your person living with dementia, but for you. Because if you aren't sleeping well, your body isn't healing, your brain isn't healing, you can't be the best care partner you want to be if you're not taking care of yourself. So I want to thank you all for being part of this. Lisa, you'll send out the link to, you would just put it in the chat.
Kind. So I will send the recorded video. I will send Melanie slides, and we'll send some other resources as well. But like Melanie said, when a couple hours from now, when you've processed all this and you have all the questions, please feel free to reply back to any of my emails that I sent you and ask all of your questions. I'll share with Melanie and we'll get back with you so that we can try and help you. You can also call the Dementia Network at our dementia office, and they'll be happy to talk to you one-on-one. Free to call us. We want to thank Melanie so much for your time. It was great to be with you. It's such helpful information I think for all of us personally and for the people we're taking care of. And we want to thank ASI for sponsoring this. So we hope you all will join us Tuesday, August 8th for our next session with Melanie. We'll be talking about food and nutrition. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, Melanie. Take care. Everybody have a great day.